Okay, welcome back. So today we're going to try the Milkshake IPA that I brewed in a previous video. I'll link that one down below. So to give a little specs on this beer, so to start, the original gravity was 1.05. The final gravity was 1.01. And again, that's probably due to the lactose that was left in there, as this is a milkshake and it's unfermentable, so it's going to give that a little bit sweeter character, but still a little bit higher final gravity for it. That gives us a 5.1% beer. So that was really good. The yeast that I used was that Verdant ale yeast. It was a dry yeast that it powered through everything really, really well. This beer took about 13 days or so to ferment and finish. The idea with this is you want it to be like a quick turnaround. So let's get into this. Again, we have this in our little 1.75 gallon keg. This was super easy. I'm going to show in a future video how I cleaned all this and everything like that. But the highlights of this before we get to the beer is that it can fully purge the CO2, because if with thing is highly hopped, you want no oxygen in there whatsoever. And then you have this little guy. So this is a mini CO2 regulator. The way it works and the way I did this keg was I first primed it with CO2. The idea of this system is a little bit different. I'm using it for different purposes. The basic idea for this one is that if you have a 5-gallon keg and you want to take this with you to go, you can. Instead, when I'm using it, because it fits in my fridge, I'm just using it this way. So the way it works is your gas in here, right here, and there's a little regulator. And so this knob right here, as you turn it, that will increase the pressure. It does say that if you pull it off, it will release pressure. That doesn't work for me. So if you over pressurize this system, just pull on the air release a little bit and it will release the pressure. This CO2 cartridge came with it. So far this has worked great. The biggest thing is that when you put this on in the beginning, you have to go really quick, because of how it's threaded and pushed in, it will start leaking CO2 really, really quickly, and you'll just lose it if you don't do it fast enough. But once it's sealed in there, this has been totally fine. The biggest thing too is that you want this to be parallel with the ground, because if you have it stick up, it can take up space in your fridge. But other than that, this thing has been great. I mean, this is obviously not the first time I've had this beer, but in terms of the fridge, it's worked perfectly. I've been able to adjust the pressure on the fly, so if it was too low, I could increase it by turning it, giving it a little time, letting it equilibrate and all that stuff. So yeah, so let's get into the beer itself. So this is set at about between 5 and 8 psi right now. So let's give it a look. So it's got that, for this style of beer, you're looking for a really hazy beer. I mean, I would describe this as somewhere between like OJ color and golden, somewhere in between those two colors. The head change is not great, could be a little bit better. It gets a little bit better with higher psi, a little bit more pressure on this. So, I mean, the color is fantastic. I would say of this beer, the thing that hit was the grain bill completely. The malt and everything that went into it, perfectly fine with it. So we'll give it a sniff. Minor citrusy notes. This should be very hoppy. I'll get into the issues with this beer in a second. So it's got a little bit of malt character, a little bit of weediness. Finishes slightly bitter at the end. But the big problem with this beer is there's no hop flavor. This beer is supposed to be extremely hoppy. It's supposed to be, the idea is that you have a little bit of sweetness from the lactose. There's a little bit there at the very end. And then it's supposed to be like fruit forward. There's no hop character in this whatsoever. So to call this a Milkshake IPA by flavor is incorrect. This, I would say, this is a a wheat ale or a wheat pale ale or something like that, or not like, a hazy pale ale. I don't know how to classify this beer. It's very good. So it's just very easy to drink. There's not a lot of complexity to it. The color is great. It's 5%. It's easy to drink. But again, we added to this a bunch of different hops, right? So we added Loral hops 10 minutes before the end of the boil. At flameout, we added Citra, Magnum, and Loral again. So I think what happened there was that I really should have just either cut the flames and let it sit for longer in there and let it drop to 180. If it got below that, turn the heat back on. I think that's something I've never done these kind of flame out hop additions before, and how you're supposed to keep it at 180. So that's where I think I went wrong. And then I dry hopped with Citra, and I added an ounce of it, but there's no character. This yeast that I use, the verdant yeast, is supposed to really accentuate hop character. There's no hop character whatsoever. The beer is fine. The beer is still very drinkable. There was a little bit of a weird sweetness when I first tried this in the keg. I would say it was a little bit corny, but other than that, it's okay. So yeah, this beer is good. It's not hoppy, but it's still tasty. This is much better than the last beer I made, I would say. So thank you for tuning in. Do all the cool stuff, subscribe if you're new, comment down below if you had issues with these kind of NEPA hybrid milkshake IPAs, and just give it a thumbs up if you think if you like the video. I appreciate you watching. So have a good one.